Hello everyone, my name is Blake and this is Walk the Parks. Today we are going to do a full hike of the Broken Arch Sand Dune Arch Loop. We'll also take a visit over to Tapestry Arch. All these arches are very beautiful. Basically just going through a couple of pictures of some of the stuff we're going to see right here, including the signs at the trailhead. I will go through and read all of those signs as well. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Obviously, if you're interested, you can just fast forward ahead to see the actual arches. This video is designed for a number of reasons. Number one, I think it's kind of cool. It's almost a guidebook, right? Like if you're going to go here and check out this trail, you can see what it's like. You can see what the intersections are like. You can see what the views are like in its entirety, right? So, it's a little bit, in my opinion, a little bit cooler than just reading a guidebook because you can actually see it. I know a lot of people kind of want to check things out before they go. I'm one of those people too, especially if you have, some sort of concerns, you've never been here before, things like that. Just want to take a look back. So this trail starts in the Devil's Garden campground, and it is a loop, and you can go. It's a loop with a kind of offshoot over to Sand Dune Arch. So because it's a loop, there's numerous places you could start. We are starting in Devil's Campground. There's a spots for a few cars here, but not very many. Over at the Sand Dune Arch Trailhead, there are more parking spaces, so consider that as well. And of course, this could be done in a variety of different ways. You could just hike from here to Broken Arch. You could hike from here to Tapestry Arch. You could do all of the arches as I'm going to do. So choose your own adventure. That's the most wonderful thing about parks. I think you can do whatever you want. Good old freedom. So as you can see, certainly kind of sandy terrain. So keep that in mind. Other thing to really keep in mind here before we get into everything else is the sun and the heat. This place can be nasty in the summertime. And you go out on here, you just got the sun, you got no shade to go chill under at all. The sun can just be beating down on you. So please be careful. Bring a lot of water. Bring salty snacks. Wear a sunscreen. Consider having like a sun hoodie or something like that. This place can be absolutely miserable. Like the hike is pretty flat, but if it's on 90, 100 degrees or even less than that, you might think like, oh, it's not that bad. But man, the lack of shade and it just beating down on you is crazy. And sometimes because this area is so dry, you can, you might not even notice that you're sweating and your body ends up losing a ton of salt without you even realizing it. Sometimes it can really beat you down. So eat the salty snacks, drink the fluids, and just be really cautious and respect it. It is definitely something that can beat even the best down. So even if you're really fit or something, man, the heat can just crush you. So keep that in mind. So other purposes of this video, I talked about, the guidebook or kind of checking it out. I think the second thing is if you're at the gym or something, and you're on a treadmill, maybe you can watch this. I mean, feel free to mute me and listen to music instead. I understand. So you could do that. That would be one option. If you're on some equipment, sometimes I leave it on in the background. Like I'll just leave it in mute on one of my monitors while I'm working on the other one, just so I have some sort of background ambience, or I'll just, if I'm just hanging out, reading a book or something like that. Yes, I do read books, although mostly I do read them on my phone or iPad. So I read, but not necessarily books in their physical form. But anyway, I'll have this on in the background. Just as something to look up at as a piece of, just something cool to have for ambiance. And last but certainly not least, accessibility, right? So there's a lot of people in the world who probably will never make it to Arches National Park. There's just a ton of reasons why that may be, financial or otherwise. So the goal of these videos is to kind of give you a more, almost like a virtual reality experience, right? Get you a little bit closer. Sure, pictures and videos can do no justice for how beautiful these places are in real life, but I hope, in 4K, if you have the bandwidth and check this out, you can kind of get a better idea. And it's almost like visiting here. Maybe not quite as good, but almost there. So Let me know down below if you like this, if you hate it. Anything, would love to hear from you. And again, it's all good too. I hope these are good resources if you want to fast forward ahead or mute me out. That is totally understandable. All right, so next I'm going to read the first sign that we passed, right? So we looked and we were at the Broken Arch Trail. And basically it says, the arch isn't really broken yet. Hike this short trail to see for yourself. Many desert animals are good at not being seen. Try sitting still and silently for 10 minutes or more. If you do spot wildlife, maintain a respectful distance for their protection and yours. You know, there can be a little bit tricky navigation here. Really, the goal is to stay on the path. You will notice throughout this video that a lot of the trails or in this whole national park, or really in this whole region of the country, are marked by cairns. So cairns are small piles of rocks. So really try to look for those piles of rocks. Also, you know, you can notice some offshoots, but do your absolute best to stay on trail. The most important thing to avoid is there's this stuff called cryptobiotic soil. So it kind of looks like dirt, but it almost has a texture to it, like this dark color. And you really just don't want to trample it. It takes a really, really long time for that cryptobiotic soil to grow. And just one footprint on it can really damage it or kill it. And it takes really, really long time to grow back. So keep an eye on that. Really, if you're going to be going places, try your best to either stay on the trail, stay on this hard slick rock like this full rock surface, no dirt, or sometimes in the bottom of sandy washes, right? Like, so a wash is a place where like a dry stream bed. So sometimes you can stay on the dry stream beds. All right, so here is Tapestry Arch. We are approaching it. Very cool. There are over 2,000 arches in Arches National Park, which is also very cool. I like all of them. You know, all of them, I guess, have different levels of how spectacular they are. You know, I've been super fortunate, and I've hiked over 20,000 miles, and I've visited every national park in the lower 48, which is awesome. I'll have to go. I've never been to Alaska or Hawaii, though. I have been to all of the 48 states in the lower 48, but you know, one thing I've kind of learned in all my hiking experience is that everywhere kind of has its own beauty, you know? I mean, in some ways, it's easy to be critical. I feel like in our whole world and society, well, at least our American society, something I've noticed is we tend to just be, you know, kind of critical, right? Like it's easy to be like, well, you know, this is more beautiful than that, or that arch is better than this arch. And maybe to some degree that's true. But I guess in another degree, I would just say, you know, everywhere has its own beauty. Every arch is kind of cool. And I would just kind of encourage you to enjoy the moment. I know I'm starting to get a little, I don't know what you'd call it, but I mean, honestly, that's how I just enjoy kind of being outside and just look at it. If I make it there or get to see something cool, then it's a win. Even if I end up having to turn around or something like that, like, it's no big deal. I mean, it's fun just to get outside and check things out. Some people, you know, maybe are going for the fastest known time, like how fast can I run to the arch or how fast can I climb this mountain, and that's fine. But then other people might be like, I want to take, like, you know, go a couple hundred yards from the trailhead and then sit, you know, in silence as the trailhead sign recommends, and try to see some wildlife. And I think it's important to recognize that, you know, different people not only have different ability levels, but different desires, you know, like not everybody's goal is to be the fastest, and not everybody's goal, though, is to be the slowest either. And it can be easy to be like, oh, they're going too fast, or, oh my gosh, they didn't even go anywhere and they just went a couple hundred yards down the trail and then sat down. I would argue strongly that there's no wrong way to do it. We're all just here enjoying nature. It's a beautiful world. So let's just enjoy it together. Gosh, I sound so, I don't even know. But anyway, that's the mentality I try to keep, just because the world is a beautiful place. It's too easy to be cynical and critical of everything. You know, I'm certainly guilty of it myself, but I do try to just remind myself of that too. So trail navigation can be a little bit tricky. So just try your hardest to stay on trail. Again, look for those cairns, look for this kind of most well-beaten path. It can be really difficult, like after a storm, to see where the trail is, like if all the footprints go away. So during those periods of time, definitely be a lot more careful. I have huge respect and gratitude for the trail builders in this region. Very difficult area to manage because, I mean, in a lot of areas of the country, there's trees, there's ground that's more dirt, so you can kind of the trail will just be extremely distinct and like a trench, whereas the desert, I say that in here that's like pretty obvious, even though we're kind of more at the bottom of a gully than than on the trail itself. But anyway, a lot of stuff in this desert area, it's very challenging. Like there isn't like that super defined trail with trees with blazes on it and things like that, so it's kind of, you're either on slick rock or on sand, and it's really challenging, right? It's like, how much do you really want to mark this place? Do you want to have like 5,000 cairns everywhere? Probably not, because that kind of takes away from the wilderness experience. But if you don't have enough markings, then people can start going off trail and trampling like that cryptobiotic soil that I was talking about. Or it's, it might be easy to get lost. And you can definitely see a lot of places too where, if you go off trail and a few people, like if you and your family do all together, you really can make a significant impact. And then maybe other people will start following that trail, and it just gets confusing and kind of damaging to the surrounding environment. So we all need to try to do our part. Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox on that. Really, I just want to say on that point, and here we are back at the intersection. That was just the 300 yard, according to this sign, side trail over to Tapestry Arch. Now we're going over to Broken Arch, 830 yards away, which I found kind of interesting. Like, I guess I don't think of the world in terms of yards. I mean, I suppose, American football, like a football field is 100 yards, right? So, but 800 yards, 830 yards, almost 8.5 football fields. I don't know. I guess I personally don't think of things in that nature. Miles would be the more common milestone, right? Or kilometers. So kind of an interesting sign there. Not sure who made that decision. All right, so next I want to talk a little bit more about navigation. So I did run into some gentlemen, and they really had no idea where they were on this loop. They weren't scared, and they really weren't in danger. This isn't the longest loop in the world. But I think it's just important to try to, maybe consider bringing a map with you, or, using an app. I know a lot of people like All Trails, which works pretty well. I prefer something called Gaia GPS. And again, this is not sponsored or anything at all. Gaia GPS is cool. There's all these different map layers you can have, but it does require a little bit more advanced skill. Like All Trails, you just kind of look up the trail and can download it, which is pretty cool. So there's just a place, looks like maybe some people have gone off. Oh, because you can see the arches so well from there. So anyway, so I chatted with some people though, and they didn't have any map or know where they were. So regardless of what you're going to use, Gaia GPS might be a little bit more advanced, or All Trails, or a good old fashioned paper map. I would just consider having one of those, and kind of look at it from time to time to think like, where am I, or what's supposed to happen? Is there a trail junction? Kind of things like that. And on out and back hikes, a good idea is to stop every once in a while and look behind you and be like, okay, that's where I'm going to go back. A lot of this area, even though it is spectacular, a lot of it can also look very similar. So as a result, it can be easy to get lost, particularly in areas where, maybe not in a national park, but where, maybe there's some cattle that are free roaming too. You might not even see them, but they can kind of create paths of their own. And it can be a little bit tricky to stay on track. So just try to stay found. And that's, it sounds like common sense, but I've found that in all of my hiking, like, you really do get better at it. And especially in different areas. Like, I would say the first time you're experiencing like this desert kind of terrain, or this Colorado plateau, it's certainly different than, say, like on the East Coast, the Appalachian Trail, or things like that, because, a lot of times you're following cairns, a lot of times you're on, slick rock, a lot of times you're dropping into these little, like, super short, like, kind of slot canyon-y things that you have to kind of look for, and it can definitely be a bit more challenging and maybe a bit slower than you're used to, right? So you might take a little bit more time to consider your navigational decisions. So keep that in mind. Also keep in mind that I do tend to be a faster hiker than most. That's not really a brag. It's just being honest. Like, so if you're using this video for a time estimate, I would consider not. First off, if I did take breaks during this hike, I edited them out. And again, I do kind of tend to not take that many breaks and be kind of a faster hiker. A lot of people will spend a lot more time at the arches, things like that. You do you. It's all good, but just keep that in mind. I wouldn't be like, oh, I got an hour, I'll go see all of these arches, because for a lot of people that might be really pushing it. On the other side, I'm sure there's people laughing right now that run this, in half an hour or something like that, and that's great for them. But again, right, no wrong way to do it. So really pretty. Though I love this. This whole area is just gorgeous. All right, so, there's also, so we'll go back to these signs here. We have coyotes in this area. There's squirrels, maybe some chipmunks. There's a bunch of lizards, a bunch of different birds. Then we'll also talk about, let's see, it's have a safe and helpful visit. So you want public lands are everyone's to share and care for. This park is unique and irreplaceable and sometimes has hazardous conditions. You can help the park and protect yourself and others by preparing well and choosing to leave no trace of your visit. Choose the right path. Protect plants and living soils by walking on hard surfaces like rocks and trails. Carving, scratching, and chalking marks onto rocks causes irreparable damage. Respect wildlife. Pets leave scent markings that stress park wildlife. They are not allowed on park trails, even if carried. Rangers build cairns, which are small rock piles, to mark routes. Don't build your own. They could mislead other hikers. All right, and right here, right here on the trail, I kind of got a little lost. So here's a tiny cairn right there, and then there is another one right in front of me. Let's see, I forget where I go wrong. I think I'm still good here. But the trail from here actually goes to the left. I go up to the right here for a minute because I'm kind of thinking, oh, it must go up here, but it doesn't. All right, so anyway, back to the leave no trace principles. Leave plants, rocks, or artifacts as you find them for all to enjoy. If you do find an arrowhead, there is the ancestral Puebloan people, which are really cool. But, leave that arrowhead there. The next person that might come, it gives other people the opportunity. If we all just take everything, it's going to be a barren zone of, I don't know. Just leave things if you find them. Drones and other remote-controlled aircraft disturb wildlife and are prohibited. Bicycles are only allowed on park roads, not on trails. All right, so here I am kind of being lost a little bit, but this actually demonstrates like one technique of becoming found, right? So I go up a little bit higher, and then I'm like, I don't see any rock cairns or anything like that. So I looked around, and then I saw in the distance like a beaten trail. So now I'm like, oh, so I wasn't supposed to go this way. I was supposed to kind of keep going straight. In hindsight, it makes sense, but I suppose in hindsight, everything makes sense, right? Right? They say like all great discoveries looking back seemed incredibly obvious, but I don't think the people in the Middle Ages were just dumb that they didn't find electricity. It's much more complicated than that. But then now looking back, gosh, we live our lives in so much based on electricity. So much so we almost take it for granted. All right, so now we're almost to Broken Arch. And I just love this out here. It's an absolutely beautiful area. We'll talk a little bit more about the area as the video continues. Let's see. Protect natural darkness. Do not artificially light features at night. And all ATVs or OHVs, even if street legal, are not allowed in the park. And if you do have an emergency, dial 911. So those are all the kind of things that we're saying at the start of this trail. There's also a map on this trail, and so it says return on the same trail or make it a loop by walking beneath Broken Arch in bearing right. The trail becomes more primitive with fewer markers, eventually returning you to the other side of this campground loop. Be prepared. Rangers build stacks of rocks called cairns to mark the trail. Do not disturb them or build your own, which can confuse other hikers. I think that's an important thing to remember. I find a lot of people, when they get a little bit misplaced, they'll be like, oh, let me mark, and then they figure it out. They'll mark a cairn being like, oh, I figured it out. But if they haven't been there a bunch of times, they might have no idea where they are, and that cairn actually is way off where people are supposed to go. And other times people think like that it's kind of a cool art thing, and I don't necessarily disagree with that. Like sometimes you go to areas and there's just 1,000 cairns, but I think there's a proper place for it. Those are the guys I ran into who were kind of lost and didn't know where they were going, but they were in good spirits. I ran into them again on the latter part of the hike. So it's kind of a little bit tricky to describe the lengths of this trail. Basically, from where we started here, if you just want to go to Broken Arch, it's 1.4 miles round trip with an estimated time of 30 to 45 minutes. Or if you want to go all the way to Sand Dune Arch, approximately 2.1 miles round trip with an estimated time of around 60 minutes. I'm actually kind of surprised. That's a more aggressive time estimate than the Park Service usually gives on this. But again, it kind of depends where you go. So for this loop in particular, I would recommend looking at a map. All right. So now I'm going to read from the website description. So this is like the national park website, Arches National Park. So hike across grasslands to a stone arch that isn't actually broken yet. You can hike out and back to the arch, make it a loop, or add a side trip to Sand Dune Arch. Regardless of what you do, I would really recommend checking out Sand Dune Arch. Like if I were to only do one part of this hike, I would and I wasn't looking for anything ambitious and wanted just the shortest, sweetest version of what you see on this loop, I would recommend doing the Sand Dune Arch because it's quite close to the trailhead. There's parking kind of right there. You wouldn't start where we started. We'll start a little bit later. All right, but that's a side tangent. Here we are at Broken Arch. You can see how it's kind of cracked in the middle. Or I don't know if you can see now, but you'll kind of get a better view as we get a little bit closer. And it is confusing. It's like, where do I go? But thankfully, there's this sign that says, trail continues through the arch. Keep off arches. They really don't want you going on top of the arch, which makes sense, especially this one with a name like Broken Arch that could break. Don't necessarily want to be on top of that, jumping up and down. There's over 2,000 arches in Arches National Park, which is hard to believe. Because a lot of them, you have to have some effort to get to them. But there's thousands more, apparently. Pretty cool. I like this trail, too, how it kind of, you do hike right through an arch. Pretty dang cool. All right, so back to the website descriptions as we're done passing through Broken Arch here, which again is really cool. So Broken Arch from Sand Dune Arch Trailhead. There's a round trip distance of 1.2 miles. Time is about 30 to 60 minutes, with an elevation change of 60 feet or 18 meters. Difficulty is rated as easy. As far as accessibility, this trail is not accessible to wheelchairs. As far as the Broken Arch Loop Trail, the round trip distance is 2.3 miles or 3.7 kilometers. Time of about 1 hour. Elevation change is approximately 59 feet with a difficulty rating of moderate. And hike description. The loop trail passes beneath Broken Arch and continues to the campground, then returns via a section with moderate scrambling. Just hiking to the Broken Arch from the campground is 1.4 miles round trip. Again, this trail is not accessible to wheelchairs. Dogs are not allowed on the trail. Service animals are allowed in national parks. Grasslands and quiet trails can be good places to spot wildlife. Many desert animals are good at not being seen. Try sitting still and silently for 10 minutes or more. If you do spot wildlife, maintain a respectful distance for your protection and theirs. Hike through okay, so now this is the Sand Dune Arch Trail description, which we're kind of approaching now. So you're going to hike through deep sands to find this hidden arch between tall sandstone walls. You may also choose to continue across a grassland to Broken Arch, returning via the same trail or making a loop through the campground. What do you guys think? Are you planning on coming to out here soon? Arches National Park is just fantastic. Sunny day today. It was really it was a little bit chilly, even though it doesn't look like it, and there was some insane wind on my way to Sand Dune Arch. You can kind of see it. I remember it just like the sand was just going in my eyes so bad. And as we'll see a little bit later, there was a couple that looked like they just got married in their wedding. She's in her wedding gown and stuff like that, wedding dress, and I was kind of like, oh man, that would be. Number one, I could see going there for photos because it's such a beautiful place, but in such harsh conditions, doesn't seem like I'd want to be in a wedding dress if there's like super aggressive wind blowing on you. But all part of the adventure. I'm sure it made it a memorable experience for them at the very least. All right, so now we're approaching like the proper loop. Like if you just want to do a loop up here, you'll be able to just take a right. But we're going to take a side trip over to the left, which is going to bring us over to Sand Dune Arch. I love hiking because a lot of times you run into people and you say hello. I feel like so many times in our world, we kind of do our best to ignore each other, right? I feel like the bigger the city, the more people ignore each other. At least in my experience, right? Like, I mean, don't get me wrong. There's super friendly people everywhere, but it would seem absurd for the most part. Like if you're in Manhattan to say hello to most people that you pass. But whereas on trails, I find you say hello to people, and it kind of the further out you get, the more likely you are to stop and chat and hang out for a bit, not just pass each other by with a hello. But at the very least, acknowledge each other a little bit. That's kind of a cool. The great outdoors are a great uniting feature, I think, for whatever reason. Versus, we're all scrolling TikTok or Instagram or whatever, and just look at your phone, don't interact. It's kind of amazing how much our world has dramatically changed in the last 15 years or so. I feel like first there was high-speed internet, and then cable internet, stuff like that, cell phones, then once like the iPhone was introduced, and then all smartphones and stuff like that. Then, cell technology got a lot better. So then you have like, very limited areas that don't have service. I mean, even now there's like Starlink, which you can get, and you can have service really anywhere, which is absolutely insane. And soon I would imagine like that, they're talking about Starlink, how you'll be able to link it to your phone, like you'll be able to text message through Starlink. So it's an interesting world. All right. So we're approaching if you head right here, you go back to the campground, and that's what we're going to do eventually. But we're first going to go over to Sand Dune Arch and check that out. So here's more grasslands. We're kind of out here. But anyway, I mean, just the fact that we're fully connected, maybe even like 30 years ago, even the concept of a cell phone was foreign, let alone like a digital place like the internet, right? Where literally all information is available at your fingertips, which is pretty incredible. And I think there are a lot of positives. I personally enjoy technology quite a bit. But that being said, it's also such a huge cultural shift that I think we're still kind of learning how to cope with it. It seems like, while it's awesome that all the information in the world is at your fingertips, it's also a little bit terrifying, like in terms of, there's also good and bad there, right? And then they're also very good at kind of getting us, like, I don't know if you guys ever use TikTok or something, but it's so addictive. You just want to keep scrolling, keep watching, like only 3,000 more videos type of thing. It's very, very crazy. I do like TikTok, but at the same time, it's terrifying how good it is. So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox there, but I think we've really gone through a huge kind of technological and social revolution worldwide with this connectivity. But I think it's really cool. Like, hiking is just kind of about as basic as it gets, right? You're just kind of walking. Granted, I'm shooting this video I'm recording 4K video and narrating over it. But the act itself is just about as pure as it gets, right? You're just kind of out here walking along in the beautiful Colorado plateau of Arches National Park. So Sand Dune Arch, you can see those kind of rock fins that are straight ahead of us. Fins are just kind of narrow, tall rocks that this area is famous for. And it's basically how the arches are created too. Like, those fins form, and then there's different layers will break off, or, like, less dense rock, through water getting in there and freeze thaw cycle, pieces will break off and eventually form arches. We're actually going to go kind of into those fins, like in between a couple of them, and then up into this little tiny side canyon, I guess you'd call it. And Sand Dune Arch is up there, which is super beautiful. First, I did walk all the way to the trailhead. I'm going to make a shorter video too that's just Sand Dune Arch. Because, as I said, Broken Arch, I mean, all the Tapestry Arch too, all of them are beautiful and worthwhile. But in my opinion, if you don't have that much time and you're looking for just a really, short additional hike or whatnot, the Sand Dune Arch is really cool, which we're about to start. Now, as far as Sand Dune Arch Trail, the round trip distance is 4/10 of a mile, or 6/10 of a kilometer. Estimated time of completion is 15 to 30 minutes, with an elevation change of 0 feet. And the difficulty is rated as easy. And the hike description is: hike through deep sandstone to a secluded arch tucked among sandstone fins. Do not climb or jump off the arch. Accessibility: while the trail is mostly level, it crosses deep sand and has one very narrow section which makes it not accessible to wheelchairs. Dogs are not allowed on this trail. Service animals are allowed in national parks. And then there is a link, what is a service animal. So keep that in mind. Yeah, you can see quite windy here as well. And again, quite cool today, but the sun was out in full force for sure. So I don't know. I always debate, like, how do you go about passing people, right? Like, I mean, if you're really in a hurry, you can just be like, you can yell or something. My normal strategy is just to say hello and just say hello to people. And most of the time people will get the point. It's funny, like, that some people almost don't want to let you pass. These people just weren't, they just weren't paying attention, and that's totally fine. I wasn't not trying to make noise. I didn't want to scare them either, and I wasn't in so much of a rush or anything that I want to be like hello or whatnot. But my technique is hello, and I find that works well. Although it's nearly impossible not to scare people a lot of times too. If you come up behind them, I think that's just the way it is. I do try to warn people, though. I think it's better to scare them from a little bit farther away than being like 2 inches away. Or if you're on a bike path or something, just yell out on the bike that you're going to pass or something like that. Just make them aware so they can at least get out of the way for you. Very cool area. I like all the, large sandstone fins. as I said, we're going to walk over real quickly right now to the trailhead. And the reason for that is I just want to show everybody how much parking there is and give the full experience. It's like if I'm going to film the full thing in real time, might as well do all the side trails and stuff too, right? And I don't know, I kind of decided to go with this format for my videos. Like, I'm not the best video editor necessarily. You know, like a lot of people might be like, all right, so we're going on the Sand Dune Arch Trail and the Broken Arch Trail. And then, you know, this is an awesome trail. Like, these are the details. This is the first arch. This is the second arch. This is the third arch. Which I'm not against. I mean, maybe I'll make these videos in the future. I mean, I have all this footage right here. I could shorten it down. But I don't think that's my strength yet. My strength is more carrying lots of video equipment and lots of batteries and recording the whole thing. So as you can see, or maybe you can see in the background to the left, there's some pit toilets at this trailhead, which is nice. You know, try to use the restroom before you go on these trails. You know, make sure to carry everything with you too. I mean, one of the most amazing things about a lot of our national parks that I've been to anyway, there's really almost no garbage. Let's keep it that way. Let's try to, you know, it'd be really cool if people 100 years from now, 1,000 years from now, 5,000 years from now, which is kind of hard to fathom, but it'd be really cool if they could come and enjoy this with the same, you know, level of pristine. So as you can see, a pretty big parking lot here. And there we go. Sand Dune Arch Trail. Again, if I only could do part of this loop, this is probably what I would do. Although, you know, I actually find the last part of the loop that we're going to do to be really cool too. Like, you go up through this canyon, it gets a little bit more remote, so you don't know. Sometimes it can be a little bit tricky to figure out, like, where am I going kind of thing. So, but it's really cool. A little bit of scrambling, and there was really not many people on this whole trail. I think I did it a little bit later in the day. I have this theory about, I call it day hikers midnight, where most day hikers are gone. And this really actually isn't true for a lot of national parks, but I feel like at 4 p.m., most people are off most trails. So if you start after 4 p.m., especially longer trails, that there's so many less people than there would be at like 9 in the morning or something like that, or noon. But again, that's not necessarily true for national parks, particularly Arches National Park, and particularly because a lot of the trails are pretty short, right? So it's not a huge commitment, and we're in quite a remote area, so people have driven a long way. It can be tricky to kind of time exactly when you're going to arrive. I just love this trail. I love it because you have this little slot canyon you go into. This is that married couple I was talking about. Good for them. Probably not super stoked about the incredible winds, but it's kind of neat, right? You get this like little tiny kind of little slot canyon to go through, and then you're in this beautiful kind of high walled canyon. One thing to consider whenever you're in a high walled canyon or anywhere narrow in the desert is, even though it seems really dry, and for the most part it is, you can also get very dramatic storms, and those storms can cause flash floods, and you would really not want to be in this area. So if it's like pouring, maybe reconsider this. In other places too, I wouldn't just consider the weather as it is right now, because a lot of canyons might drain water from like really far away. So there might be a big rainstorm really far away, but where you are, there's no water. But as a result, like in large canyons, sometimes that water can go all the way down. And as you can see, you know, the slick rock here doesn't exactly absorb water very well. So it just slides right off of it. And then that's kind of what causes the flash floods. You know, contrast that with like, you know, the East Coast or Midwest, where you can just get a ton of rain and the soil just absorbs. The soil's so permeable, it just absorbs all of it. Whereas here it's like very non-permeable. So it'll just kind of, water will go along the surface and then cause flash floods. So you can kind of see the terrible wind. I'm kind of putting up my hand trying to block the wind from getting in my eyes. And here we are, Sand Dune Arch. Such a cool area. Pretty cool arch. It's like, I mean, I suppose the arch isn't as spectacular. I think the part that makes me say that this part is the section I would recommend is more just due to the. I like that you're in this narrow canyon. The arch is kind of unique right in here, and you kind of get that slick, that slick rock feel, and you get the kind of that slot canyon as well. Not as fun would be that super strong wind. Again, I thought that the camera footage would actually be crazier. I remember just like, getting blinded, like right up here. Like, yeah, you're just getting, you can see the flecks of sand if you look closely at the video footage, but just absolute insanity. Oh my God. Good old desert. One of those things about hiking and backpacking is that there's always at least one variable against you. There's like, it could be heat, it could be just the sun, it could be cold, it could be the wind, it could be the wind carrying grains of salt, or excuse me, grains of sand and just whipping into you, getting into your mouth. You get those like, those you kind of clench down and grits of sand. And then these guys are trying to have their wedding photo shoot. That's awesome, though. Good for them. Congratulations, strangers. All right. Back to the super narrow part here. All right. So that's Sand Dune Arch. Now we're going to go to the right and head back to the campground. All the way at the end in the campground, there is like a short, like 100-yard connector trail, which I didn't do. I was actually lucky enough to get a spot in the campground. Speaking of that, Devil's Garden Campground is the only campground in the park. It's really not that big. There's maybe like 60 sites, something like that. And I recently saw something that was listing the top 10 most booked or busiest campgrounds, and Devil's Garden Campground was on that list. So just beware. Might be really difficult to find a spot there. I was able to get spots. My strategy is, I'll give away my secrets here, but my strategy is to just book one night at a time and then switch campsites. But I know for a lot of people with RVs, or I don't know, for some people like taking down and putting up their tent, and they have this whole big setup, depending on what your goals are and what your camp setup is like. But I don't mind taking down and putting up my tent. I've been lucky enough to do so much hiking, and a lot of that has been backpacking. So as a result, that's very common for me. On this trip, though, I had my truck and car camping, and I sleep in my trucks, which I love because you can just I just wake up, make the bed a little bit, and then I'm ready to go. And my home is where, and I don't have to have a big vehicle. Although I must say, in a lot of instances, I'm very jealous of the beautiful RVs people have, and you can have these like beautiful, huge lounge areas. Same thing with Sprinter vans and stuff. Kudos to you. It looks amazing. I always thought, for me, the truck is the kind of compromise, like, because you can go off road, you can get a little bit to further campsites, or go on 4x4, get to some 4x4 trailheads if necessary, but then you can also sleep in it, but also not as livable, right? So if I'm just like hanging out and just in the bed of my truck, it's like, not much to do and not the most comfortable, if I wanted to work remotely or something like that. Certainly not as easy as it is in a Sprinter van or an RV. But that said, man, I don't even know how people do it. Those huge RVs going over way in the middle of nowhere, going over mountain passes, just looks stressful. But to each their own. But at the same time, once you get there, God, it looks awesome, and I'm jealous. So the pros and cons of everything in the world, right? All right, so now I'm going to kind of just go into some details, kind of facts and figures about this area. And again, these videos are the full length, so This one, because there's so many kind of idiosyncrasies, I decided to speak through the whole thing. But I don't know if that's really the best thing. I mean, obviously you can just mute me out if you get annoyed by me, which I'm sure some people do, and that's fine. But some of my longer videos, I just kind of talk for like, a little while, and when I'm done with everything I have to say, I just cut it off, and then the rest of the video is silent, and you can kind of watch it or go through and skip ahead to the sections of trail and stuff that you would like, which I'm sure YouTube hates in terms of the algorithm, because a lot of my videos, I think they want videos that are so awesome people watch from start to finish, but some of my videos I don't think people will. Like again, I would hope at the gym maybe people have it on, or some people might just mute me out and watch it in the background, and that's cool, but I don't necessarily see a ton of people watching all my videos from start to finish. But anyway, all that is to say, what do you think? Should these videos be in 2x speed? I've found that so far, like, there's no real consensus. Like, I do this, and some people are like, oh, it's boring and drawn out, and it's like, yeah, I could see that. But then if I do 2x speed, I always get comments that's like, why is it sped up? So it's like, yeah, I get that too. So I don't know. And then I've thought, like, oh, should I release all of them twice? Like one at 1x speed, one at like 4x speed, or something like that. But anyway, these are the dilemmas that I face. Would love to hear your opinion and feedback. They looked happy. That's nice. All right, so Arches National Park. It's situated in southeastern Utah near Moab. One thing I wanted to say. So while Devil's Garden Campground is so popular, right, and it's constantly booked and very, very challenging to get a site, especially during peak time. And peak time to visit this park would be in spring and fall. Summer kind of gets too hot and nasty, wouldn't necessarily recommend that. And then winter, believe it or not, you can get some ice and snow, or at the very least, it can be windy and freezing cold. So keep that in mind on your journeys. Spring and fall are the best. I would still, storms for sure, and high fluctuations in temperature and weather for sure hit this area, though. So regardless of when you're coming, I would be prepared for cold and hot. Sounds kind of crazy, but that's kind of the desert. It's kind of a land of extremes, right? Even when it's at its nicest, the difference in temperature between nighttime and daytime can be pretty significant. So keep that in mind. But if the campground is full, Devil's Garden Campground, other places to consider, like the town of Moab, which is a pretty large town by the southern Utah standards. It's probably not very large for if anybody lives in any size city really at all. But there is significant lodging there. There's quite a few campgrounds that surround Moab, and then there's also, a ton of hotels and RV parks and stuff like that. There's just a ton of good stuff to see. One thing I want to mention is that I filmed this video in 2024. We're coming up to the intersection right here, and we're going to go back to the campground because we're going to complete the loop. Obviously, you could also do the loop in the other fashion as well. I'm kind of doing clockwise with the trip over to Sand Dune Arch, but you could do counterclockwise or do whatever you want. But anyway, so... Oh, I forgot where I was going. So lots of good places to stay in Moab, though. Absolutely beautiful place. Oh, I made this video in 2024, and at the time that I made this video, they did have what's called timed entry into the park, and I'm not sure if that's a pilot program or if it's going to be permanent or what, but the key takeaway from that is I would for sure research, so go to the Arches National Park websites, and then also consider going to recreation.gov and looking at the regulations within Arches National Park, because when I went, you actually had to have a specific date and time. There's like a couple hour window, I think, that you have to enter the park. And if you didn't have that, I believe you got turned around. Now, I was staying at the campground, so that kind of let me bypass that, but certainly something really important to consider, because you don't want to show up here and be rejected at the park. That said, there is actually a ton of really amazing stuff around Moab. So if that were to happen to you and you kind of overlooked the idea of, booking a timed entry in advance, and they do sell out, But if you overlook that, there is a ton of amazing, amazing, amazing things around Utah. There's got to be a lifetime of adventures here, if not 10, to be honest. But, a lot of people want to go to Arches National Park. Delicate Arch has got to be one of the most iconic landmarks of the Southwest. So I could for sure, see people wanting to go that. Anyway, all of that to say, just be careful if you're going to go here. Make sure to look up the requirements for reservations and stuff like that. Things have changed quite a bit in recent times. There's been quite an explosion in interest in the outdoors and national parks, and their kind of attendance has gone up while a lot of their budget has stayed the same or gone down. So as a result, it seems like a lot of agencies are managing that a little bit differently, and some of that means more permits, for better or worse. About 76,000 acres. As I mentioned before, there are more than 2,000 natural sandstone arches. Highest density of natural arches in the world, which is really cool. They were formed through millions of years of erosion, primarily by water, ice, and the expansion of salt within the rock layers. This area is home to a variety of desert plants like the yucca, Mormon tea, and various cacti. Wildlife includes spadefoot toads, antelope squirrels, scrub jays, peregrine falcons, and occasionally mountain lions. I feel like it'd be hard to live as mountain lion here, but I suppose there is animals to hunt, but that's always one of those fears, Like I feel like a lot of people are afraid of bears and things like that, but mountain lions I think are a little scary because they can see, a lot of times they'll probably see you, but you don't see them at all, which is kind of crazy to think about. So the Sand Dune Arch is particularly popular for its intimate setting, where visitors can walk right up to and under the arch, feeling the cool sand in a shaded alcove. Yeah, it was cool in there too. Like temperature wise, and it's just a cool, awesome place. So as you can see, a little bit more scrambling here, a little bit more hesitation too from me as far as like where do I go. Um, Again, a little bit tricky. Main key would be to avoid that cryptobiotic soil and just take your time. Usually you find a cairn, you can see an area that has been kind of trampled on, or trodden, I guess would be the more legit term. But just take your time. A lot of times if you're at somewhere and you're like, do I really have to climb that? The answer is no, and you can look around and find an easier way. Not always the case though, sometimes you just gotta go for it. But I would first look around before you. And also remember the number one rule of canyoneering: don't go down anything you can't go up, and don't go up anything you can't go down. So very important to consider that. You might think, oh, that's silly, but oh man, especially in the slick rock too. Like you can get so much traction sometimes going up can be easy, but then you turn around and you're like, oh my god, it's so steep. It's just scary. So keep that in mind. Or you might be like, oh, I can jump down there, and you kind of make a big jump and then trying to get up, and you're like, oh no, it's too steep. So that would be the reason for the number one rule. All right, so Colorado Plateau, encompasses parts of Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona, known for its colorful landscapes, deep canyons, and high desert environment. I like to think of it as like it's almost like the area of our Earth that looks like Mars, right? Like you get this red rocks, it's all the slick rock. A lot of it's kind of not devoid of vegetation, but not that much, and you're in this harsh desert landscape. This region, believe it or not, though, is home to several Native American tribes. The ancestral Puebloans live in this area. There's numerous petroglyphs and ancient ruins. And remember, just try to leave no trace, right? I mean, especially if it's like a beautiful ruin, there's no need to touch it. You can go up a little bit closer in a lot of instances and take pictures and stuff like that, but every little bit can potentially damage the environment too, so just be careful. All right, so up next we have about 5 more minutes of this hike, and then we'll move on. So I did a really long through hike. I made up a route one time, and I walked from Yellowstone to the Grand Canyon, part of a larger trip that I also called Walk the Parks, where I went and visited all the parks in the lower 48 and did about 14,000 miles of hiking along the way. Really a fantastic trip. But anyway, so I started the trip with a through hike that I made up. I started in Old Faithful in Yellowstone because I thought it was kind of cool, like the most iconic landmark in what's considered the very first national park, which is in the world, which is Yellowstone National Park. So I started there, and then I connected every national park in Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, into Nevada for Great Basin National Park, and then down to the Grand Canyon to finish off that wonderful hike. But I was walking from Grand Junction, Colorado to Moab, Utah on a trail called the Kokopelli Trail. And I went over this one road. It was supposedly like a road where cars could travel on. But I don't know whether something had happened within the last few years. But looking at it, I just thought, man, I would be astounded. And I've seen people do pretty cool off-roading, and see what some modified vehicles are capable of making it over. But I was like, there's no way someone can make it through here in this one area. And I ran into a vehicle, and they were gonna go do it. I almost actually wanted to be like, hey, can I come and see? I did see them again, and they ended up telling me that they didn't make it. And I was like, oh, okay, that makes more sense because their vehicle was modified, but not like insanely so. So they didn't make it through the area. I didn't think they could. But anyway. Well, first off, this area is also an off-road mecca. You can see we're approaching the campground. You can see that in the background here. Mecca for off-road, mecca for mountain biking, mecca for hiking. Really an outdoor mecca. I mean, the Colorado River goes right through this area, as does the Green River. So there's huge amounts of rafting opportunities as well. So whatever kind of floats your boat, if it's not hiking, consider all those other activities too. But anyway, the guy talked to me for a while. And then he's like, I have a plane. Give me a call and I'll take you up in my plane. And I was like, what? So I gave him a call though, and it was really fantastic. I went over there and we actually flew, and he kind of asked me about what my route was going to be leaving the Moab area. And we kind of flew over all sorts of stuff. We went over near Arches. We went over Canyonlands. We went over to the Needles District, as well as the Maze District, which is very remote and very cool. Anyway, kind of a cool thing that I think of whenever I'm in this area. So I don't know. Are there any questions you guys have about this that I didn't answer? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch if you've made it this far. And again, if you're planning to go to this area, or if you have any hesitation, I would say do it. It is an absolutely fantastic area. The only thing is, if your only option is to go in the summer, just be really careful. The heat can be just such a killer, literally. And it might not be that much fun. Like, I know, again, a lot of people might be like, oh, I love heat, but this is a different sort. It's just kind of, it's like you're in an oven or something. It's not that much fun. So, and I know that's easier said than it is comprehended. Like, and a lot of people go anyway, and I do understand that a lot of people only get vacation in the summer, but for sure, just make sure to be very, very careful. So now we're kind of approaching the end. I remember I kind of got off trail in a couple places. Again, you can imagine how this area might be very challenging to navigate your way through if there'd just been a big rainstorm, because if all these footprints are gone, it's like, where is the trail? And you can kind of see, but kind of not. So keep that in mind and just be really careful, because you don't want to trample any cryptobiotic soil or make new trails through here. And it's also really cool here because you can just, if you're lucky enough to be able to get campground reservations, you can either walk over to do the whole Devil's Garden loop in that whole area, or you can do this loop right here. So quite a lot of opportunities for exploration just straight from the campground, which is really cool. Thanks so much to everyone for watching today, and I hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope you enjoyed this wonderful hike of the Broken Arch and Sand Dune Arch Loop in Arches National Park.